Hello everyone, my name is Stephanie Rodriguez and I will be telling a first-person story about events that led up to my first trip to Mexico. My first trip to Mexico was an experience I never expected. I had just turned 26 in November when my father got a call from one of his sisters, an aunt that lived in Mexico. My aunt was calling to invite my family to come visit them in Mexico that following year in February for a family reunion. My father would make these yearly trips to Mexico, but because at that time early on, my mother couldn't take time away from home, and my younger sister and I were so little and such a handful, it just kind of became normal for my dad to go on these trips to Mexico by himself. As my sister and I got older, though, my dad did start inviting us to go with him on these trips to Mexico. I remember that first time he invited me to go with him to Mexico. I had just turned 14. He said, "Stephanie, do you want to go to Mexico and see your grandmother this year? It's been a while since she came to visit us in California, but I know she'd love to see you and your sister. And I'd really love for you to both get to know of my hometown of Jalisco, Guadalajara." So I was 14 when my dad asked me to go with him on that first time to Mexico. And I remember giving him the typical teenage response. "Dad, I don't want to go to Mexico. I don't know anyone in Mexico but Grandma, and I love Grandma, but I'd be so far away from my friends. I don't want to go." So I was 14 at that time, and I really just didn't want to be somewhere new and unfamiliar, and my dad got that, even though he was disappointed. For every year after that, though, my dad would still continue to ask me and my sister. And though as we did get older, we wanted to go to Mexico, my younger sister and I were always just so busy, and we really didn't make time to go. In 2016, my grandmother passed away. When I heard she had passed away, I cried so hard. Prior to my grandmother's passing, she had called and invited my younger sister and I to go visit them in Mexico. But something came up, and I wasn't able to go. Neither was my sister. I really regretted that I wasn't able to go that time, and every time after that, my dad would invite me. When my dad got that call from my aunt inviting us to go to Mexico for a family reunion back in 2017, I knew this time I would say yes when my dad would ask me to go with him. Despite my fear of planes, I packed my bags and I went on this trip to Mexico with my dad and my younger sister back in February of 2018. We got to visit the house that my grandmother lived in. A brother of my father's actually lived there, and every room reminded me of my grandmother. The house was it had her personality, and it just really made me miss my grandmother even more. But being in Mexico, walking the same streets that my grandmother walked, meeting all these people she talked to on a daily basis, it just really made me feel so much closer to my grandmother. My first trip to Mexico was the most amazing experience, and I cannot wait to go back next year. That was my story. Thank you for listening.